My name is Eugene Bardak. I'm very glad to be here. My dream, since I wrote this book that I'm going to talk to you about today, the book is called A Practical Guide for Policy Analysis: The Eightfold Path to More Effective Problem Solving. Now, unfortunately, it's a book of dreams. It's not actually about doing things so much as it is about thinking about doing things. So that's the farthest I can go in dreaming. I can only dream that this kind of book and whatever I share with you today uh, can make help you and others make wise policy. Wise in the sense that it can help you all achieve your dreams. Not just seem to or make you feel, but actually do it. There's a big gap between the feeling and the doing,
Thank you.
as
Yeah.
you probably know. Um, let's see. Okay. This this book is a book probably that you should buy and you should read. I don't like to be seen as a kind of a commercial hawker for my own product, but really I get almost nothing from selling it. So uh, really it's idealism that says you should buy this book. The book talks about 8 steps in a path for thinking. Uh, I'm going to read them to you because they're important. Define the problem, assemble some evidence, construct the alternatives, select the criteria, project the outcomes. Very difficult because it talks about the
Thank you.
future, which is hard to predict. Confront the trade offs,
Good afternoon. Can
stop,
you hear me? Is this
focus,
on?
narrow,
No, it's on.
deepen,
Okay. So let
decide,
us figure
and
out
tell your
a
story.
way to turn this on. Microphone.
Now,
people are
this
not wearing
is
a
just a
headphone. You
bunch
can
of
wear a
steps.
headphone and tune to channel 1.
They're
Okay.
quite difficult actually, and if you want to think that you have solved all your problems by knowing the names of these steps, think again, because each one is A, difficult to do, and B, beset by pitfalls, traps, problems that you fall into without really being too aware of it. So I want to spend a little time talking with you about some of these, but the one generalization I can make about this that I hope will help you is this is not a book about getting the right answer. It's a book about asking the right questions. That's pretty hard. And the one great big question that I want to talk about with you today is compared to what? Thinking wisely about policy is often about making comparisons, making good comparisons, making intelligent comparisons, making the right comparisons, but doing it. And so there are 4 comparisons I hope we can talk about today. I've given them little tag names: the actual versus the better. These will become more clear as we go along. These outcomes versus those outcomes. Any given policy or set of policies is going to have related but different outcomes. And so they have to be compared in a way. Each possible outcome versus the outcome of the base case. This is a logical step to help clarify your thinking. I call it analytic hygiene. It's not that it's such a great idea all by itself, but it's a building block to help you do other intelligent things. And finally, trade offs. Hardly any policy compared to another policy is better in every single respect. Okay? Some policies, in order to get X, you gotta give up some Y, which you get more of with another policy. Those are trade offs. How do you do that thoughtfully? I want to use a concrete example with you, something that probably you're familiar with. You people are either in a position to make decisions uh, or to hire people to do analysis that'll help you make decisions. You've probably, in your countries, run into the problem of roadway accidents, and I'm focusing with you today on those that have to do with trucks and cargo. So here are three facts. You can take them as facts, okay? In some hypothetical country, and you're sitting in government, and these are known to you, and from this, maybe or maybe not, we're gonna think there's a problem here. Government should maybe be stepping in to maybe be doing something, okay? You're at a very preliminary stage of thinking through a problem. Here are these facts. One is, in 2017, there were 395 serious truck accidents. A second fact is property losses from truck accidents totaled $25 million, up from $22 million a year earlier. The third is our road network is not designed for modern trucking. It is both limited and unsafe. Now, of these three things, which, although it's not ideal, do you think would be the closest to driving you towards a useful problem definition? Maybe you don't think any really is, but I'm just giving you these three alternatives. You have to choose. Which would be the best, do you think?
In order for they're interactive, so therefore whenever a new one goes in, it recalculates. So let's give
I see.
let's give them a minute or
Not
two.
everybody voted.
Put in your votes now, please.
I've never used this technology before. I'm learning along with you guys, if you haven't done it either. Look at that. It changes as you watch what your neighbors are doing. Okay.
Well, we talked a lot about GovTech, and we've talked a lot about education, and this is one of the tools that we've been using.
Okay. So, the one that was most popular with you guys was the last one. But let me share with you what I think was still missing from. They're all relevant. What was still missing from the first two? The first one was 395 serious truck accidents. Well, compared to what? Compared to what? Is 395 a big number or a little number? You know, if there were 1 million road miles of trucking, last year, 395 might seem. So sorry. 390, is that better? Yeah. 395 might seem like it wasn't much. But if it was only, 10,000 miles, that's a lot. So we need some kind of frame of reference, and that's true for everything. Secondly, property losses. Well, we have a little bit of a frame of reference established here. They're going up. They're going up. They went up by about 15% from one year to the next. That's a trend. Or is it? It's only 2 data points. It's only 2 years. So it could be random, couldn't it? Could be nothing. You probably like a third data point, the third year. Wait another year. Or go back in time another year. See what is 3 good enough? Maybe, maybe not. If you don't have the luxury of having a good data set, which you probably do not, then you may be ready to go with this. Thirdly, our road network is not designed for modern transportation and is unsafe to begin with. Well, there's a problem with that one. According to my recommendations in this book, what if you define the problem as being that the roadway network is antiquated and not very good, you've almost guaranteed that your solution is going, your policy solution is going to have to do with fixing the roads. You're focusing so much on these roads, and it really may be part of the problem. However, there's another possibility. Maybe you should focus on the driver. Maybe driver safety is a better intervention than fixing the roadways. Oh, wait a minute. What about the trucks? Trucks, they change all the time. The technology gets better. We may be driving on the roads with trucks that are 20 years old. Maybe they're unsafe. I come from California, where it was just discovered that the electric and gas utility in Northern California was operating with a lot of equipment that was absolutely unsafe. And during bad weather, a lot of failures that then caused billions of dollars worth of fires. It was unsafe equipment, but not just equipment. They didn't cut the trees. That's not quite their equipment, but it's not either people or electricity, but it's kind of their responsibility of the company. So we wouldn't want to establish a definition of the problem that pointed only to the generating equipment or only to the wires. Also, managing vegetation seemed to be part of the problem. So one of the things about compared to what is, you don't want to compare things that are going to lead you down the wrong direction. Second step in the Eightfold Path, assemble some evidence. Well, with regard to the truck problem, what more evidence would you like to accumulate, to assemble? Probably you want that trend information over time to be a little richer, so you can be confident it's not just random. How about personal injuries? Well, we've just referred in the initial account of the issue to the property damage. But how about people being hurt? Is that going to escape our notice? Probably should be in there. And here's another datum. Low-cost fixes. What could you do that would be very inexpensive but have a high yield? That's a very interesting bit of evidence you could acquire, but you won't find much of it in your country or your jurisdiction. You have to look outside. Somebody else has faced the same problem, haven't they? What do? Maybe they found the secret sauce. Maybe they'll share the recipe with you. Very likely they'll be happy to do it. Find out about that. That doesn't mean you do it, but you send your employees to go do a little survey. One good thing about alternatives is that if you've got a bunch of them, they force you to compare. Intellectually, psychologically, you just about can't avoid it. It's very hard to say, I only have two alternatives. We can either do this or let the status quo remain. Do nothing and let the problem continue, whichever way it goes. Okay? But I have this one alternative. We either do that or we don't. Well, that would be very nice if you had a good alternative and you could really simplify your life. But probably you should not do that. Probably you want to compare more broadly than one thing versus do nothing. That's it. So I just invented a bunch. Maybe that's good for you too. We can have safety training for all the truck drivers. Or, as a second possibility, I just made this up, right? Safety training for a portion, just a few. Maybe the worst 20%, the ones that had a record of the bad accidents. Third, how about safety equipment for trucks? Fourth, roadway replacement, naturally. And fifth, what I recommend you always have on your list, let present trends continue. Notice I do not say do nothing. Why not? Because Doing nothing means if there is a trend in motion already, that goes forward. So it's not as though nothing new is happening. Something is happening. And you should be aware of what that is. Your temptation is to say, let's compare all these alternatives to one another. That's logical in a way, and that's what we're going to do in a way. However, the problem is that is kind of clumsy and logically not really possible. What we really want to compare is outcomes compared to one another. Outcomes that are connected to the alternatives. For instance, and you want to have a kind of common metric to compare them. And I recommend something like this in this case. Look at the comparable outcomes in terms of a metric called accidents prevented per $1 million spent. We want to take account the cost of doing something and the benefit or the yield. And so I do a little long division and I create a number that I attach to every outcome in projection. Accidents prevented per $1 million spent. Or you could flip it upside down, as fractions will permit, and you could say dollars spent per single accident prevented. A low number would be a good outcome there. And so you could compare these outcomes with respect to how low their numbers are, or if you did it this way, how high the number is. Accidents prevented, a higher number is a better outcome. So you could compare the alternatives by saying the outcome for this alternative is better than the outcome for that alternative, therefore this alternative is better than that alternative, using only this one dimension of accidents prevented per dollar spent. Now, we come to a very difficult problem. Not every outcome is simple. So usually they're complex. They have many different dimensions. And how do we compare? And we have many outcomes. So how do you simplify the problem? Simplify, simplify, simplify. First thing we do is we eliminate outcomes. Take a look at your handout here. Look at table 1. And just for fun here, I made up these numbers so you could see what I'm doing. And I have across the top, across the columns, I have minimize the number of accidents. Then I have maximize the cost effectiveness, that is, the metric is dollars per accident prevented. And finally, maximize road upgrade. And the metric there is the miles of road that you're upgrading. I always want to put the metric so I remember what I'm doing. Down the rows I have these 5 outcomes listed. Alternatives. Universal safety training, targeted safety training up to 20%, truck safety equipment improvements, roadway improvements, and let present trends continue. And I put into each cell, I put an expected outcome. These are not holy, they're just scratch work, things that I need to kind of remember to look at. Okay? And I can notice one very important thing, which is that targeted safety training, the second row, is much better than universal safety training in terms of cost effectiveness. So if and they don't differ at all on the road upgrade because we're not dealing with roads there. So there's no reason to, given what data are here in these cells, to hold on to number one. I can throw it away. It's dominated by number two, targeted safety training. By the way, they also dominate the third row, which is mandated truck safety equipment, by a lot. So I'm going to throw that away too. So in the end, I only have two things. I only have two. And I'm going to take the last alternative, let present trends continue. And even though it's cheaper than everything, for other reasons, like I really would like to prevent accidents, I'm throwing that away too. So I've cut this list down. I've simplified it. Okay? I'm down to table 2. I've chosen as a base case targeted safety training. And I've also listed roadway improvements. And I'm just going to compare those two. So what do I observe here? I observe here that that if I spend the same amount of money, I get 80 prevented accidents if I do safety training, and I get 50 fewer, only 30, if I do roadway improvements. But on roadway improvements, I get an extra 100 miles of improved roadway. That's worth something. How much is it worth? Well, if I'm going to choose roadway improvements as an alternative to targeted safety training, I have to believe that these 100 more roads of miles of road that are improved are worth giving up 50 fewer accidents. I'm going to prevent fewer accidents. In effect, I'm kind of trading off lives. Presumably some of these accidents are fatal. I'm trading off lives for roadway improvements. Is that fair? Well, I don't know if it's fair, but it's not avoidable. You may not want to do it, but that's what's happening in your projections. And somebody could say it's immoral to do that. And you could say, and they could say further, we should never calculate lives in terms of money. Well, it can't be avoided. There's a lot to be said about this, and I'm not going to say it. It's a big discussion. You can write books about it. But the fact is that in real life, these calculations always occur. How many would like to choose road improvements and sacrifice lives? And how many would like to choose the lives and sacrifice the road improvements? I just want to see a poll. There's obviously no right answer, of course. But, what's your intuition about it? If you were the minister in charge of making the decision, how would you choose? If these were the only two choices. In real life, there'd be more, I think. But we're doing a toy example here.
Do you actually want a poll?
Huh?
We can do a poll. Raise of hands for number 1.
Oh, raise of hands instead of how many were choosing roadway improvements, and how many are choosing safety training. So the intuition is much more for that one. Now, I could ask, I would love to have a little discussion as to why you choose one way versus the other way. But the technology of communication with microphones doesn't permit a nice conversation, I think. So let me just point out one very important thing. A decision to go one way or the other way on your compared to what on the trade-offs involves both factual assumptions, like the number 50 fewer lives, accidents prevented, and and values. How much do I value a life versus whatever I get out of roadway improvements? You can't avoid doing both the values and the factual estimation. They are going to be part of both of these, even if that makes you uncomfortable. Some people, the facts are make you uncomfortable because you can't really be sure. I mean, is 50 really the right number? It could be, 100 or 200 or something, not 50. It's very iffy. How about the value of accidents? Well, how many of these accidents? The value of roadways. Well, you can go a little faster. It's a little easier. The hazards won't be as great in the rain. It's hard to say really what a roadway improvement is really all about. So you're left with kind of mushy variables here, which leads me back to my original claim. This is not a method to help you get the right answer. It's only a method to help you raise the right questions. The right question is, what do I make of the trade-off between 50 accidents prevented and 100 miles of roadway improvement? That's a right question. It may not be precise, but it's still right. But you can't get the answer just from reading the question. That requires a whole assembly of values on your part, values on the part of other people in the decision process, and an estimate of the facts. This is just a slide to go over the four comparisons we talked about. Actual versus better, that's what often comes up in the defining of a problem. How much, I have an actual world, I would like to make it better, I think. Is there a big enough problem that I don't have it better? Okay, if it is, I'll work on it. Secondly, outcomes versus outcomes. Remember, the takeaway there was, don't play around with alternatives, play around with the outcomes in comparison. Thirdly, create a base case so that you can see more simply what should be compared to what. I don't think we spent enough time on that. You'll have to buy the book. And finally, the trade-offs. We have a step in the Eightfold Path called Confront the Trade-offs. And they're always there. And I've given you one little teeny tiny example, but they're usually much bigger and much nastier. Okay, I'm going to be around for the next couple days. If you want to talk about any of these things, feel free to grab me by the shirt collar, and I'll be happy to talk.